And the field conditions were a major factor as well. You know, just like the U.S. Belgian game, the description was that the puddles were so numerous you could no longer count. You know how much water and mud, because 90 days prior it had been complete rain. So you know that we talk about the stadium being started in January of 1930 and having to deal with delays because of rain. So when you go to these fields that were not intended to be used before the World Cup or at all, and then they had to be maintained and conditioned, there was a lot of maintenance, kind of maintenance that was, you know, putting straw down, trying to pull away water from specific areas, maybe the goal mouth, you know. So the conditions and the cold weather, you know, it's obviously that's the winter at this moment. So the U.S. experienced a bit of snow flurries. So I assume that Brazil also encountered very atrocious conditions.
Yeah,
that the Yugoslavians were actually used to, because they played in their dead of winter, just like the U.S. would always play in the dead of winter.
Brazil played with 2 shirts because of the cold weather. And
Right.
they drank tea at meat time. And another anecdote is we had radios in Brazil since 1922, 8 years before.
That's
But
good.
I don't know, the States started the Fed, that radio was for fun. Let's have music and everything, right? We didn't. For 8 years, our radio program was cultural, which means very, very serious. And seriousness did not include football at all. So
Right.
we did not send a radio to Montevideo in 1930. But we had...
So there was no live transmission to Brazil of the matches via radio.
But
Okay.
there was a cable, of course, a tall cable that sent the news from Montevideo to the newspapers in Brazil. And the way that in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, when people listened to the game, was they went in front of a newspaper building and then threw a piece of paper or alto-falante?
Yeah, loudspeaker.
Right. They knew the results. But the anecdote was that when Brazil was losing 2-1, there was perhaps a 5-10 minutes difference between the news and the game, and the game was ending. Came the news that Brazil had made 2-2. We scored 2-2. I know there was a big party in Rio de Janeiro in front of a newspaper. Everybody hugging, like Brazilian style. And then there was another news saying, oh, we made a mistake. The last cable was just confirming that we had scored the first goal. They didn't say that we scored the second.
Oh.
That was very sad. Really, really sad. So you are celebrating the great success of your team, and a person, just give you the wrong information. And then it ended. Of course, the fight between Rio and Sao Paulo continued for at least a decade. Including the 1950 World Cup. And we probably had our first really national selection in 1954. That was the first one. Before that, it didn't go well. We went well in 1938, because we had a very, very special player, Leonidas, which was from Rio de Janeiro, one of the greatest players in the history of Brazilian football. But that was it.
Now, the U.S. had the opportunity to play against professional teams in Brazil, in Rio, and 4-on-4 matches, pre-World Cup matches, as well as afterwards.
No.
And so they played exhibition matches.
I had some. This is the first page of a Brazilian newspaper when Mexicans and Americans arrived.
I see Alex Wood and Jimmy Douglas there. Yeah, on the right.
That's your grandfather somewhere here.
It's a good eye.
But it shows the importance that was given to the Americans. When the Conte Verde stopped in Rio de Janeiro coming from Europe, that was a very, very short stop. No player left the ship, and Julius Rimet did not leave the ship. He gave an interview inside the ship. Well, people went there while they were waiting to come to the docks, and he said he knew nothing about the Brazilian football. It never mentioned that he was carrying the World Cup trophy. Nobody knew that in Brazil.
Yeah, there's probably a good reason for that. It's solid gold.
So. Yeah, it was. It was in a. Well, I don't know if it was in a ship coffer or safe, or it was in his cabin. Rimet was full of histories. But anyway, it was a very, very short stop, 2 hours. And then they left, stopped in Santos, which is in the littoral city of São Paulo, is a port. Every ship stopped there. And then they had 1 hour. Some players left the ship, bought bananas and pineapples. It was very Brazil. Yeah. And then they went up. But the Munargo stopped longer in Rio de Janeiro. They arrived at 7:30 in the morning until evening. And they visited 2 clubs in Brazil, very high-level clubs, Fluminense and Botafogo. And they asked if they could play against themselves or with some team. They did not play with the regular teams of Fluminense.
Yeah, not a full team. And that was the 4-on-4 matches that they had.
Yeah. Perhaps the interesting thing is that, if I'm not wrong, until that day, no U.S. club had played in Brazil.
I can't remember a U.S. team coming down to South America and playing in Brazil whatsoever.
Yeah. So the other thing is that our newspapers have news about France, about Portugal for obvious reason, and Spain, Italy, because we had immigrants and everything. But I couldn't find a single piece of information about U.S. championships before 1930. I looked at all Brazilian newspapers. So we did not know what to expect from them.
Okay. Well, it's fair to say that the team that they brought to the first World Cup was drastically different than the teams that competed in the 1924 and 28 Olympics, because those were amateur teams. So they're amateur players, and you really didn't have the best of the professional side. So that was, like I said, we didn't have a problem with amateur professionalism within the league in the United States, like everybody else did for the most part. You know, my grandfather on his 1930 census was listed as his work was a professional soccer player. You see, so we didn't have that problem, and with the amount of immigrants that came through and populated, as you were saying, in with the 1920s, all throughout the 1920s, it was literally from 1925 until 2930, that we had the strongest elements within the United States.
Right.
And kind of justifiably, the U.S. eligibility at the beginning of the World Cup, before they started, was questioned. On July 7th, the Uruguayan delegate, who was the chaperone and caring for the U.S., basically called a press conference to dispel the rumors that the U.S. had brought English ringers onto the team to participate. Out of the 16 players that came, there were 5 players from England and Scotland, and only one of them, George Morehouse, played about 3 or 4 matches with Tranmere.
Right.
So he is the only person who ever touched a ball on the Great in the Great Britain football arena. So that was he is the only person that you could ever say, okay, well, he was a professional, but they all spent their time in the U.S.
Right.
No one ever left the U.K. to come to the U.S. to play down in the World Cup. And the only person who had questionable citizenship was my grandfather. In fact, they left on June 13th from Hoboken, New Jersey. On June 15th, he received a telegram on the ship, on the SS Monago, from the court, in the Bronx court, granting him citizenship because of his father. His father was a naturalized American citizen. So he was the only one who was waiting for that stamp of approval once he got, but he already had the telegram saying that, yes, in fact, as of this date, he is an American citizen. But he had been in the U.S. since November 1928. So he hadn't been there for very long. But still, it's not like he just came 2 months before and then jumped on the team. So.
Well, so because our newspapers at the time did not know anything about the States, they went to see the practice and they wrote about it. And it's funny. Go ahead.
Yes. This is a loose translation, right? In their majority blonde, the American footballers are a strong type of North American men. They're all slim, then at first glance with great physical qualities. As for their technical abilities, there's not a lot we can say.
You see?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
This is newspaper.
Newspaper. Now, the Mexicans came in the same ship, and they went to another field, and they had a train. What the newspaper said about the Mexicans.
Right. Young and frail, but very agile.
See, our reporters could not understand the style of play of the Americans. And as I read on a Uruguayan newspaper, El País, the Uruguayans did not understand either, because they said, oh, they run like crazy and they shoot from whatever they are. Yeah, what they want
Anywhere.
because of that. But to our style in South America, and that said, the Mexicans are very agile. We like to run with the ball, dribble, make some I don't know, turns with the ball, and the Americans were apparently straightforward. We are here to score goals. How do we score goals? We have to shoot the ball on the target. So whoever has a chance, shoot.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and
we, you know,
as per the newspaper, we assumed that was lack of technique.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, they described, you know, what was a beautiful, well, kind of a funny description. At the end of the World Cup, when they came back, they're on the way back up, and they stopped in Brazil to play a number of exhibition matches. In the manager's report, W.R. Cummings, the manager, he said that the U.S. found that the Brazilian players were like rabbits, jumping all over the field, dancing all over the field, because it was a type of dance, like a ritual, and they had never ever seen any type of play like this before. So you see, so we were just as mesmerized and bewildered, you know, and didn't know how to adjust, because we didn't have players who would dance with the ball. You know, a lot of them could jump higher, you know, and they were great at heading. They were great at controlling the ball, shielding the ball, but also they were fast as blazes. You know, my grandfather was very tall for his age, and he was taller than most American players. You know, I say American, but you know, that's a mix. It's a melting pot. So it's, but he was taller than the majority. So he was able to get up above and to control in the air, you know. But he also had a lot of faults. He would also he would tempt the offsides, and he was often called for it. But you know what? That one time that you get through and you don't get called, you better make it count, you know? Yeah. So the idea that if you don't take chances, you're never going to know. He always told my dad that. You know, he said, if you smell a goal, then go for it.
Right.
It doesn't matter where you are, because if you don't take that chance, you have 0% chance of scoring. But if you do take that chance, you've got at least 30% of scoring. So if you feel that you've got a really good situation in front of you, you know, a chance to sneak it by or to blast it by, go for it. So
we have a very interesting relationship with Brazilians in general. I'm not going to say this outright, but there's a tendency to prefer to look good and lose than look bad and win. And I think the two examples are the 1982 World Cup team and the 1994 World Cup team. 94, we won with Parreira, a very pragmatic team, defense-oriented. We had to eventually win in penalty kicks. And although it was very much celebrated, it did leave a little sour taste in our mouth. The 82 team is widely regarded as the best Brazilian team of all time. By most journalists, you know, it's become quite common. Just, oh yeah, 82 team, yes, and they'll start mentioning the players and everything. But that team lost to an Italian team that would eventually be champions, but played very badly that game. A lot of mistakes, Junior giving up some goals. So I think what we see here in 1930 is the little kernel of that. It's the birth of how do we want to play. And we've always, when we actually did manage to play this way from the 50s and found relative success with it. We thought that it would be it. And now we know that it's just become a hybrid, right?
Yeah.
It would have been awesome to see this World Cup just for the clash of styles.
Right.
Since they didn't really know each other. So it's not like you saw the tape. You have to adapt on the spot. And, you know, you have all these 6-foot Americans who are running and shooting and what do we do? It really was the birth of the game that we know today. It really was.
Well, it's very interesting. It's an interesting comment. You know, their training methods beforehand, they did more calisthenics and more running than any touching of the ball, any ball movement or practice. No, very little practice matches. They only played against Nacional one time. The trainer, Jack Cole, he basically said, listen, you guys know how to play. That's why you're here. You all have your individual skills and what you can bring to this team. And that's why you're in the specific spot that you are. But what is needed, if you can run like the wind, then you'll be able to just flow and blow down the field like nothing is ever stopping you, even if the wind is against you, you know. And all of those technical skills that you have from your pro teams and playing against each other and playing with each other, that's all going to melt together and mix together. And that's why they were called the shot putters, you know, because they had legs and the physique like Olympic shot putters.
Right.
So reporters always saw them running endless laps around the field, and that's it. And that's what really helped to bring them through the pool stage. So
Especially in muddy conditions and all that. So really,
yeah, and we were used to that. We played in the dead of winter from January 1st,
right.
you know, and up until December 25th, you know, during a regular season. So we were very, very well trained and conditioned to play in this winter state, you know.
Allow me just to confirm something you said. That's also Brazilian newspaper from the time. It is curious that the majority of the American players is European, including the center half of the team, William Gonçalves,
Yeah.
who is Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
And had to obtain the naturalization as a Yankee to play for the US team in Montevideo. So they picked the wrong guy. No, that's confirming what you said. It's not the
Yeah.
they picked.
Yeah, he was born in the United States. You know, I have his birth certificate. You know, because that is
know it now, but at that time nobody knew. And the first time I started to interest myself in World Cups, I was sure that this was true, and then researching, I found that it was not.